Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is LB the Realist, and this is Surrealistic Studios, where the real is surreal. Now, I thank all of you for joining me today. I want to encourage everybody to hit that subscribe button so we can keep in touch and I can bring you more stories. I'd like to encourage you to like this video before I even get started. Just show a brother support, and I will show you some support back. And comment when I'm done with the video, because I really need to hear what you have to say on this issue. Now, as we watch the March for Our Lives, and we watch people on both sides of the issue, whether you're a Second Amendment proponent or you're a Second Amendment opponent, and you feel as though we should repeal the Second Amendment, or we should ban all guns or all semi-automatic rifles or assault weapons, as they put it, I think that it's very important that we continue this conversation. I know I said in a previous video that I'm tired of talking about gun control because, honestly, it's nonsensical, and what we should do is very clear. Well, I've never been more incorrect in my goddamn life. What we should do is not very clear. It's not very clear, and we do have to further this conversation because there's not a lot of people that truly understand what's going on, myself included. I completely admit that. So I'm learning more. I'm doing more research, and as I'm doing more research, I'm finding out interesting little factoids that I think is absolutely imperative that other black people are aware of, as well as anybody else. So in regards to gun control here in America, and I know that if you're not an American, you're not gonna understand the love affair that Americans have with guns. I mean, I'm an American and I barely understand it my damn self, but from what I understand, from what I get, from what I feel, America is a country that was born out of rebellion. So when you have a country that was born out of rebellion, the right to protect yourself and the right to fight against an oppressed government, or an oppressive government, is very it's tied to your very being as an American. As an American, we are rebels. That is who we are. So in that aspect, that's why we're so gun-ho. Another aspect of it is, because there's so many guns here in America, there's a certain probability or a certain percentage of people that will take those guns and do fucked up shit with them. So because there's a certain percentage of people in America, in the world really, but in America, that will take these guns and will commit massacres, or they will take these guns and they will, infringe upon somebody's right to live or to be safe. It is up to people, good law-abiding citizens, to protect themselves and to protect the lives of their loved ones. I know one of the good reasons to have a concealed weapons permit, in my opinion, that I've heard, is that the police are under no obligation, no absolute obligation to protect your life. They're not required to save your life. If you've noticed, with all these police shootings and the instances of police brutality, they care more about themselves and getting home to their families than anything else. And that's just the sad reality. Look at the Parkland shooting. The officer that was there on site didn't even go inside of the building. He thought that maybe the shots were coming from outside, or maybe that was protocol. I don't know. But the sad reality of it is, he did not go inside. He did not do what he was there to do. He did not accomplish the goal, which was to protect those kids. So as we move on here, I wanted to go ahead and highlight the racist history of gun laws here in America. So I want to read to you a little bit from history.com, and it's entitled "How the Black Panthers Inspired California's Strict Gun Laws." Now, this article was actually written recently, March 22nd of 2018. So this was only a few days ago, actually. And I think it's very important for black people to understand our history in this country, our history with guns, and, the I guess the stigma surrounding that. Because black people are the reason, we are the absolute reason that we have gun control in America at all. It's because of us. So I'll go ahead and read here. With each passing day, the debate with each passing day, the debate for or against gun control rages on with the United States. And although the National Rifle Association, or the NRA, currently leads the charge for the rights of all citizens to carry guns of all types with little to no interference from the government, the original gun rights advocates to take that stance were the Black Panthers. Throughout the late 1960s, the militant black nationalist group took their understanding of the finer details of California's gun laws to underscore their political statements about the subjugation of African Americans. In 1967, 30 members of the Black Panthers protested on the steps of the California State House, armed with 357 Magnums, 12-gauge shotguns, and 45 caliber pistols, and announced, "The time has come for black people to arm themselves." And this is during a time in Oakland where police brutality was going unrecorded. We didn't have the internet like we have today. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have all this footage that depicts what's going on. That's why when black people say, we've been beaten in the streets, we've been getting shot, this is nothing new. This isn't a new thing. We're just now seeing it so prevalent because with the invention of these things right here. So for all of those people that are claiming the racism is no longer or it's no more, you're completely full of shit. And I implore you to do further research. So just continuing here, the display so frightened politicians, including California Governor Ronald Reagan, that it helped to pass the Mulford Act, a state bill prohibiting the open carry of loaded firearms, along with an addendum prohibiting loaded firearms in the state capitol. The 1967 bill took California down the path to having some of the strictest gun laws in America, and helped to jumpstart a surge of national gun control restrictions. We all know how bad California has it with the gun control. We have gun control laws out the wazoo. It's unbelievable out here. And this was all in direct response to the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California. The law was part of a wave of laws that were passed in the late 1960s regulating guns, especially to target African Americans, says Adam Winkler, author of Gunfight: The Battle Over the Right to Bear Arms, including the Gun Control Act of 1968, which adopted new laws prohibiting certain people from owning guns, providing for beefed up licensing and inspection of gun dealers, and restricting the importation of cheap Saturday night specials, pocket pistols, that were popular in some urban communities. In contrast to the NRA's rigid opposition to gun control in today's America, the organization fought alongside the government for stricter gun regulations in the 1960s. So it's very important to note that the National Rifle Association was not always for the protection of gun rights. They were actually for gun reform back in the day on more than one occasion. So this new notion of protecting everyone's rights and, being diehard over the Second Amendment and not wanting any kind of gun reform at all, this is a relatively new notion. Let's see. This was part of an effort to keep guns out of the hands of African Americans as racial tensions in the nation grew. The NRA felt especially threatened by the Black Panthers, whose well-photographed carrying of weapons in public spaces was entirely legal in the state of California where they were based. The Black Panthers were innovators in the way they viewed the Second Amendment at the time, says Winkler. Rather than focus on the idea of self-defense in the home, the Black Panthers brazenly took their weapons to the streets, where they felt the public, particularly African Americans, needed protection from a corrupt government, which I absolutely feel the same way today. These ideas eventually infiltrated into the NRA to shape the modern gun debate, explains Winkler. As gun control laws swept the nation, the organization adopted a similar stance to that of the activist group they once fought to regulate, with support for open carry laws and concealed weapon laws on their agenda. Few aspects of the United States Constitution have been as murky and divisive as the Second Amendment. The amendment states that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So just important to note that proponents of the Second Amendment will say, I've had somebody leave on my comment section before, regulate privileges, not rights. Well, it says here, right in the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia. So if it says right there in the Second Amendment, regulate, then we most certainly can regulate. I'm not totally against all regulations, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I am against regulations that will only be implemented in a low income or in neighborhoods that have a high number of people that look like me. And a lot of people are noticing that when it comes to these kind of laws, these laws, especially like the war on drugs, they specifically go after people that look like me most of the time. So these laws will be disproportionately attributed to black people and Hispanic people and anybody that has dark skin, basically, or anybody that doesn't have money, anybody that doesn't have power. So while some view the amendment to mean that American citizens have inalienable rights to guns, focusing on the right to bear arms, others take it to mean that only a well-regulated militia would have that undeniable right, with the emphasis on well-regulated and militia. The Black Panthers would find themselves in the middle ground of both interpretations. Originally called the Black Panthers for Self-Defense, the radical African-American group was formed in 1966 in Oakland, California by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. Based on the ideology of the late Malcolm X, they believed that the right for racial inequality would not be won by a slow drip of nonviolent actions and protests, as Martin Luther King Jr. preached, but that stronger actions were required to ensure black people's survival. A large part of the group's campaign against racial injustice relied on gun ownership and training. Newton and Seale began collecting a variety of guns during the early years of the Black Panthers, including machine guns, rifles, and handguns. New recruits were required to learn how to wield, clean, and shoot guns, in addition to understanding the right to carry firearms and how to communicate that to police in California. Newton put his own knowledge of the law to the test after he and Seale were stopped by Oakland police officers in early 1967 in a vehicle filled with weapons. When questioned about the guns, Newton simply replied that the only thing he was obligated to do was give his identification, name, and address. At the request of the officer, Newton stepped out of the car, rifle still in tow, and refused to explain why he and the other Black Panthers were carrying their weapons. As onlookers gathered, the police tried to disperse the crowd while Newton welcomed them. He knew that under California law, bystanders could legally view an arrest as long as they did not intrude. Since there were no violations for the police to charge the Black Panthers members with, and a growing pack of witnesses, they were able to leave the scene without any trouble from law enforcement. Emboldened by their calm exchange with the police, members of the group began to follow police cars and dispense legal advice to African Americans who were stopped by the police while legally carrying their weapons. The group referred to these activities as police patrols. We absolutely need that in 2018, but the problem with doing police patrols is that they just shoot us. You know, it's I don't know, it seems like the problem is even worse in 2018 than it was back then. In some instances, in a way, right? In a way. You know, it seemed like they were getting away with that shit back then. I have a hard time believing that a new Black Panther Party, a 2018 Black Panther Party, would be able to do the same thing. And even a state that allows open carry still. I could be wrong on that. But I mean, with everything going on, you never fucking know. I mean, police are just shooting everybody. They're shooting white people too for following instructions. That's the main thing people say. Well, they should have followed the officer's instructions. Daniel Shaver did follow the officer's instructions, and he still got shot on the ground, no weapon. So, Bobby Seale and Huey Newton used the Second Amendment to justify carrying guns in public. To police the police, says Winkler, The Panthers would stand to the sidelines with their guns, shouting out directions to the person that they had the right to remain silent, that they were watching, and if anything bad happened to the Black Panther, that the Black Panthers would be there to protect them. They also organized a march to the Capitol to draw attention to their cause of fighting against a government that sought to infringe on their right to bear arms. On May 2nd, 1967, 30 fully armed Black Panthers occupied the California state capitol. The demonstration was motivated by Republican Assemblyman Don Mulford's bill to repeal the law allowing Californians to openly carry weapons, a direct response to the Black Panthers police patrols. In direct response to the Black Panthers police patrols. That was the reason they first outlawed open carry in California. Because too many black people had guns in the streets. And they were exercising their goddamn right. Their goddamn given right. Before entering the building, Bobby Seale read a written statement on the Capitol steps in front of Governor Ronald Reagan. The American people in general and the black people in particular, Seale declared, must take careful note of the racist California legislature aimed at keeping the black people disarmed and powerless. The group of activists occupying the Capitol with fully loaded weapons on full display was an unforgettable sight. However, their demonstration backfired and the bill passed both the state assembly and the Senate with full support of the NRA. In addition to repealing open carry gun laws in California, Mulford made it illegal to take firearms into the Capitol. On July 28th, it was signed into law by Governor Reagan, who later commented that he saw no reason why on the street today a citizen should be carrying loaded weapons. Can you believe that, Republicans? Your ex-president, our ex-president, Ronald Reagan, said that there's no reason why on the streets today a citizen should be carrying loaded weapons. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with it? I want to know. Mulford had effectively played on white America's fear of African Americans during the 1960s, stripping away the power of the Black Panthers found in brandishing their guns. While the bill was effective in disarming the Black Panthers, it didn't have much effect in reducing criminal violence, Winkler notes. I'll say that again. While the bill was effective in disarming the Black Panthers, it didn't have much effect in reducing criminal violence, Winkler notes. Although it may seem contrary to the ideologies of the NRA in the 21st century, this wasn't the first time that the NRA, which was originally founded in 1871 with the intention of training Civil War veterans on marksmanship, had supported gun control legislation. So this wasn't the first time that they supported gun control. In the 1920s and the 1930s, the National Rifle Association supported restrictions on who could carry guns on the streets in order to decrease hostility towards European immigrants who were known to openly carry weapons at the time within the country. And after the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy in 1968, the NRA backed the Gun Control Act that passed the same year, which put substantial restrictions on the purchase of guns based on mental illness, drug addiction, and age, among other factors. This was the Gun Control Act in 1968. So, again, this was not the first time the NRA has backed gun control. So this notion of the NRA, always being for people's rights and the Second Amendment is just not true. Ironically, they voted with both the Republicans and the Democrats on the Mulford Act. So they were totally with disarming Black Americans in the 1960s. Let's just keep that in mind. Ironically, it was the gun control laws that were put into effect against African Americans and the Black Panthers that led to rural white conservatives across the country to fear any restriction on their own guns, Winkler says. In less than a decade, the NRA would go from backing gun control regulations to inhibit groups they felt threatened by to refusing to support any gun control legislation at all. The NRA would go from backing gun control regulations to inhibit groups they felt threatened by to refusing to support any gun control legislation at all. So again, gun control or gun reform was introduced way back in the day with what they used to call the black codes. And I'll go ahead and read a little bit from Wikipedia on the black codes if you're not well versed on that. But this explains how we first had open carry taken away in California because of the Black Panthers in Oakland. They were trying to defend themselves against police brutality. So with the Mulford Act, the Gun Rights Act of 1968, in which they got rid of Saturday night specials because those were the guns used supposedly in low income or minority neighborhoods. And also prohibiting people from carrying on the Capitol. So on the state capitol. So yeah, that's a little bit of history on where some of our gun control comes from, on a lot of where our gun control comes from, and the history of how the National Rifle Association actually voted with Democrats and Republicans and Ronald Reagan in regards to that. Now, I'm gonna go back a little bit further. I know this is getting a little long, but if you're still with me, I appreciate it. I'm gonna read to you a little bit from Wikipedia on the Black Codes in the United States. The Black Codes were laws passed by the Southern states in 1865 and 1866 in the United States after the American Civil War with the intent and the effect of restricting African Americans' freedoms and of compelling them to work in a labor economy based on low wages or debt. Black codes were part of a larger pattern of Southern whites trying to suppress the new freedoms of the emancipated African American slaves, the freedmen. Black codes were also enacted by northern states such as Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and New York prior to the Civil War to ban free blacks from residing in those areas. Since the colonial period, colonies and states had passed laws that discriminated against free blacks. In the South, these were generally included in the slave codes. The goal was to reduce influence of free blacks, particularly after slave rebellions, because of their potential influence on slaves. Restrictions included prohibiting them from voting, although North Carolina allowed this before 1831, bearing arms, gathering in groups for worship, and learning to read and write. A major purpose of these laws was to preserve slavery. In the first 2 years after the Civil War, white-dominated Southern legislatures passed black codes modeled after the earlier slave codes. They were particularly concerned with controlling movement and labor, as slavery had given way to a free labor system. Although freedmen had been emancipated, their lives were greatly restricted by the black codes. The term black codes was given by Negro leaders and the Republican organs, according to historian John S. Reynolds. The defining feature of the black codes was broad vagrancy law, which allowed local authorities to arrest freed people for minor infractions and commit them to involuntary labor. This period was the start of the convict lease system, also described as slavery by another name by Douglas Blackmon in his 2008 book on this topic. So they go on to describe how they would go around and arrest black people on minor infractions just so they could lock them back up, put them in prison to get more free labor, to continue the cycle of slavery, of African American slavery here in this country. And that's why they have the 13th Amendment, which doesn't totally abolish slavery. It abolishes the perceived influence, if I can borrow some terms from the Democrats. The perceived influence of slavery, but it actually still makes it okay to have slaves if they're imprisoned because they were charged with a crime. So again, this was called the Black Codes, which were modeled after the earlier slave codes, which were only put in place to keep African Americans in check. So that was just a little bit of history on gun control here in America and its racist roots. Again, I'm not saying this to say that I don't believe in any kind of gun reform at all, because that's not true. I'm only saying this, I'm only bringing this up to really highlight the fact that these gun control, a lot of these laws that they're passing are not really for the protection of our children. There's something else nefarious behind the scenes here, and a lot of it is just restricting rights on law-abiding citizens. And these new laws that they will enact will disproportionately affect black people and people of color in this country. So we absolutely have to be aware of that fact. We absolutely have to be aware of the fact that the NRA was not always for your rights. So let's be clear on that. Let's be honest. Let's be open, and let's be perfectly clear. The NRA was not always for the rights of African Americans. Neither were the Democrats, neither were the Republicans. We're not perfect, but that is the reality of it. Okay, so whether the NRA is still racist to this day, or whether they, there's an argument to be had that they are, and how they go about certain situations in regards to like the Philando Castile case, in which people were mad that the NRA leadership in particular didn't speak up on the Philando Castile case as it was going on. There was one guy who mentioned it that actually does videos on YouTube for NRA TV. I believe his name is like Coleon or something like that. And he's a black guy that they got, they gave him his own show. And I believe that they're using him to attract more African Americans to the NRA. Call it what it is. And Dana Lash, actually, which I believe she's a spokesperson for the NRA, which she was at the town hall with the Stoneman Marjorie Douglas students from Parkland, Florida. And she was basically there to be the bad guy. She was there to be the fall guy, and for everybody to point their fingers at the NRA and say that you're killing the kids and it's your fault that you're doing this, and all you care about is your bottom line, which is selling more guns. There's an argument to be had about that, although I don't believe the NRA does sell guns. They're a Second Amendment advocacy group, if I'm not mistaken. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. The point of what I'm trying to make is that this is not a clean-cut issue. This is not a black or white issue. This is an issue that has a very large gray area, and there's history that needs to be remembered here. And we need to remember this history going forward as we talk about these issues, and as we try to come up with viable, logical solutions. Like one of the things that these students are marching for, and by the way, I haven't really done a video on the march because I'm still really gathering information on it. I really still don't know how to feel. I'm proud of them. I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of the fact that these kids are standing up for what they believe in, and they're not taking any bullshit. I love that fact. I love it. Do I think there's some weird stuff in the background going on? Possibly, like how fast they were able to put everything together, the march and all of these appearances on mainstream news channels. David Hogg, his mother was actually an affiliate for CNN, or she worked for CNN, and his father actually worked for the Federal Bureau of Investigations. So there's some weirdness involved with that. I'm not going to act like I haven't noticed that. I'm not going to turn a blind eye to that shit, but going out here and just attacking these students and saying that they're just crisis actors, or saying that, they need to learn CPR like that dumbass, I believe Rick Santorum said on CNN or whatever the fuck he was at. That was some bullshit. You're going to tell these kids, these survivors, that instead of going to other people and having other people solve their problems, as he put it, that they should learn CPR for when their friends get shot. Motherfucker, CPR ain't gonna stop a bullet wound to the head. It ain't gonna stop a bullet wound, period. You get shot up by some fucking bullets, CPR is not gonna do you too much good. Okay? That was a dumb ass, irresponsible, and insensitive thing to say. I was floored by it. I can't believe this dude actually went on TV and said that shit. But there's been an influx of people that don't find anything wrong with going on TV or going on, the mainstream media or alternative media and trashing these kids. And I don't agree with trashing these kids, because I don't know for a fact that they are crisis actors. I don't know for a fact that any of what they're doing is nefarious at all. I have suspicions, and I'm questioning everything, and I'm trying to keep an open mind, but I don't know anything for a fucking fact. I don't believe in absolutes. So I reserve judgment on that. All I'm gonna comment on is what I see and what I can feel personally. And from what I feel, it seems as though their cause is just, although I don't agree with everything that they're calling for. I don't agree with the ban on assault weapons. I don't agree with that because first and foremost, you have to define what an assault weapon is. What are we talking about? What defines an assault weapon? Is it the adjustable bump stock? Is it the mag release? Is it the pistol grip? What is it that defines an assault weapon? And then furthermore, once we figure that out, we have to realize that it doesn't matter if you ban an assault rifle versus a regular rifle. They're both hunting rifles. Any rifle can be used to hunt, and any rifle can be used on an assault, therefore becoming an assault rifle. So you got to get that clear. And another thing, I may have evolved on the issue of the age restrictions. Governor Rick Scott of Florida actually raised the age limit from 18 to 21. And that was one of the things that the students actually were in favor. They were in favor of that as well, raising the age limit, which I was actually surprised about because that does infringe upon their rights to own guns. But they view it as a necessary evil or as a necessary, something that's necessary to do so they can save lives. And I did a video on it recently, probably a week or two ago. And I don't think I've ever had a video that was more hated. You want to lose subs or you want to lose people's support, just talk about any kind of gun reform. You know? And I'm trying to be as honest and I'm trying to be as forthright with this as possible. I'm not trying to be fake about it. I'm not trying to come out here and just say what I feel as though people want to hear, because that's not who I am. I say what I feel because it comes from a real place and it needs to be said. So in regards to this age limit thing, there is a case to be made that is unconstitutional. If the legal age limit to become an adult, to become a man or a woman in America is 18 years old, then I guess there is an argument to be made that if you restrict their rights to own and bear arms, as it so clearly states in the Constitution, then you are infringing upon their rights as American citizens. That is an infringement. Furthermore, is there a context to this? Yes. I was doing just a quick research, and I don't have the numbers or the names in front of me here, but most of the shooters from these major shootings that happened in America, most of these people were over the age of 21, I believe. So these were all older individuals, especially the one in Las Vegas. He was a way older guy, in his 40s or 50s or something like that, right? If I'm not mistaken. If I am, whatever. He was over the age of 21. That's the point. The point is that I made the argument that a 21-year-old is more mentally capable than an 18-year-old. And I believe that I misspoke. I don't think that that's always the case, because I've seen plenty of cases where a person that you believe, or the person you think should have common sense, doesn't really make it all that common. And then a person that is young, such as these students in Parkland, who speak very eloquently and are very intelligent, and they obviously know what's going on. They are obviously well educated on the matters and well versed. You know, there's kids like that would have absolutely no problem owning a gun and not going into a school and shooting his or her classmates. And I say her like there's actually been cases of women shooters. Most of these guys are white men, white males. You know, that's just the numbers. But there is an argument to be made that raising the legal age limit to buy weapons in Florida or anywhere is unconstitutional. I'm starting to see that. And in regards to, you know, the bump stocks, I still feel kind of the same way. I feel like my argument is more complex now. I just feel as though if you give a bump stock to a person that's well-intentioned, he's not going to shoot a place up. If you have a bump stock with the person, if you give a bump stock to a person that's not well-intentioned, then obviously that's what it is. And that's just the old argument: a bad person with a gun, and then a good person with a gun. There's two kinds of people: bad people and good people. The people that would never fucking shoot up their school or church or club or whatever, and the people that fucking would. And another point that I must make that I left out of my previous gun control video, that I'm mad at myself that, I didn't really highlight this further, but there were instances in which people alerted the authorities. They alerted the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which, mind you, David Hogg's father is in affiliation with. They were told about the shooter in Parkland. The local sheriff's department were told about the shooter. Multiple people, multiple agencies were told. They were made aware of the situation, and nothing was done to prevent this tragedy from happening. And in the town hall that they had with the students of Parkland, and when they had Dana Lash there from the NRA, and they had the sheriff, Scott Israel, all he wanted to do was put and focus the blame on the NRA and Dana Lash, when logically a lot of the blame should be put on his agency, on his department. You know what I'm saying? And the FBI, who refused to do anything about this situation. So we have to put the blame where the blame needs to be put, and it's on the people that knew about this situation, that knew about this crazy guy that somehow got these weapons. Somehow passes background check, passes mental nobody, I don't know if they even checked for that or not, but somehow he was able to get these weapons and carry out this tragedy. That should have never have happened, ever. One more point I want to make in regards to arming teachers in schools. I think that it's a very shaky situation, and I think that more polls or more research needs to be done. We need to actually speak to more teachers on the issue. I've heard from a few teachers, and from the teachers that I've heard, they don't want to be armed. They don't want to worry about having to, have a gun on them and shooting a possible ex-student or a student that came in to shoot the place up. They want to focus on teaching their students. And I understand that that's what they want to focus on. Well, most of them were the ones that I've heard anyways. But we also do have to understand that we live in a different society in which school shootings happen all the fucking time now, for whatever reason or another. That's another video as to why as though they're happening. But for whatever reason or another, they are happening. So, and there's an argument to be made that if you arm teachers, certain teachers will end up killing students. Because a lot of these teachers get into it with these students. They get into physical altercations a lot of the times. What's going to happen when they get into an altercation with the student and the gun slips out? And a fucking tragedy happens. Or they get into an altercation with a student, and the teacher purposefully pulls out his or her gun, and shoots the student. Because just out of a moment of pure rage or anger or confusement. You know what I mean? So, I'm very weary on arming teachers. Now, if you want to arm certain people within the school, such as more security officers, I may be I'm a lot more inclined to arm more security officers than I am in arming teachers. Teachers should focus on teaching. Security should focus on security. The problem with that is they had a security guard there, or an ex-police officer, or whatever he was, a person that was armed, and he didn't do what he was supposed to do. So I don't really know I don't know. I guess really what it's boiling down to, really, and you guys are watching me evolve as I'm talking about this now. I know this video is long as fuck. I'm still going to upload it and see what happens. But what it's really boiling down to is accountability for your own fucking actions. Accountability needs to be on the person who committed these heinous acts. Accountability needs to be put on the FBI and the local sheriff's department that did nothing, that did absolutely nothing to combat this issue. They did nothing to prevent it, even though they knew and were aware of the situation about this person. I don't agree that, you know, just because somebody says something about you, that the law enforcement should be able to come into your home and take all your guns away. I don't agree with that. But when you have a case that's so repetitive, that was so prevalent, and you had so many of them, I believe that there should have been some kind of investigation. There should have been something done about this. And that's just the reality of it. So we have to put more accountability on the FBI, on the local sheriff's department, on our political leaders that actually have the power and the capacity to do things. You know, it shouldn't be on law-abiding citizens. It shouldn't be about taking away all of our rights because these assholes over here didn't care for the law, somehow got around a background check or a mental check, or somehow made threats online and somehow got around the authorities. It shouldn't be left to us to save the children. It shouldn't be left to teachers to arm themselves with guns to protect the children. When we actually pay people for these kinds of jobs, and we're paying people for these jobs, apparently, that they're not fucking doing. Instead, they want to focus on Russia, Russia, Russia. Or they're too busy, you know, following a series of red tape that they can't get through the fucking red tape to do the actual job. So this one ran long enough. I just wanted to give you guys, again, the history, the racist history of the original gun reform crowd and the original gun control in general in America. It started off as infringing upon the rights of African American gun owners. And before that, it started by preventing ex-slaves or freedmen from having weapons in the first place. So knowing this, knowing that the NRA wasn't always our friend, knowing that Republicans nor Democrats were always our friends, we need to be more aware of this going forward. And we need to be more aware of personal accountability in regards to this situation, because I don't want all guns banned. I don't want all semi-automatic weapons banned. And I don't think that banning things for law-abiding citizens is the correct path to go. I think that, you know, enforcing the laws that we already have on the books is a more logical approach to this situation, which means holding our authorities accountable for what they do and for what they don't do. And that means holding individuals accountable for what they do and for what they don't do. And with all that being said, like this video if you like, share if you feel as though it's shareable. I do. And subscribe to me if you haven't before. We need to stay connected. With all this bullshit going on with YouTube and the government and infringing on people's rights, we need to stay connected. We need to stay networked. Keep that in your mind going forward, because the deadline is coming up for net neutrality, for when they can actually start implementing their tiered bullshit. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And love, peace, chicken grease, spread that enlightenment. Keep fighting. And until next time, I'll see you guys on the next one. Oh, find me on all social media, Twitter, Facebook, BITCHUTE. 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 All right. Have a good one.